without limits or judgment. A place for you and people like you to tell your most effed up stories. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Effed Up Stories. I am your host, Will Pender.
And I am your co-host, Ryan Sharp.
And tonight's episode is special. It's actually one that we've been delayed putting out for a couple of weeks. And it's the first story that Ryan's come to me with that has really excited me to do a podcast for quite a while. So before we jump into it, I'd just like to throw out the usual, if you have a paranormal story, video, picture, whatever, submit that to us. Go to the official site, effedupstories.com. That's effedupstories.com. And hit the menu, go to submissions, fill it out, send it to us. And while on that topic, I'm personally very interested to hear a new type, what's our next Skinwalker Ranch? If you got a really messed up story, an effed up story, something that, most people don't know about, maybe it's not your story, but it's just something that you stumbled upon on the internet, I want to hear it. I want the next really on the fringes crazy story, some kind of topic for us to cover. So if you got that, send it to us. So with that having been said, on to the topic that we're covering tonight is actually, let's just outline how we even came into this, because the whole thing is kind of interesting. Someone on one of our YouTube videos had commented that we should cover something on Bell Island. And if you're not familiar with what or where Bell Island is, it's this little tiny, it's a tiny island in Newfoundland. And to get to it, out in St. John's, you actually take this little ferry service to and from. I've been there before. Ryan's been there before. It's part of the reason why we were interested in it at all, because we'd been there. It's so close to home, and yet we didn't really know of any paranormal stuff. So this commenter had mentioned that the Bell Island boom, which was this really loud bang that everyone had heard, and it had killed animal life. It had destroyed parts of people's houses and stuff like that. I believe electronic equipment had actually caught fire, and at first, the theory was that scientists had said, well, we think this is mega lightning, and there had been there's plenty of other places around the world where they've experienced this similar kind of thing, but then again, these meteorologists had gone back over the information and found that there was just no way that the weather would have allowed that for what was going on at the time. And then there's the story of there's this bog where this banshee, or this old hag, they would call it. These men would cross through this bog and just disappear for days or weeks. and it was this hag that had grabbed them. And there was a banshee that apparently that, people would hear the banshee scream, and then somebody, they knew would die, kind of a thing. And just by hearing it, you could die. So these are the things that if you Google Bell Island paranormal, these are the things that you're going to come across. This is what we thought we were going to cover. But Ryan stumbled into something much, much more interesting. You're not going to hear it anywhere else. It's exclusive. So Ryan, tell us about how you stumbled upon the story to begin with.
Well, like you said, the circumstances surrounding my discovering this story are rather interesting, just all on their own. As you mentioned, we were doing some digging around trying to find some information on Bell Island. And while doing so, of course, I contacted different relatives of mine, as I am from Newfoundland. I thought, well, maybe there's somebody from home who knows some interesting stories. And while the initial round of phone calls I made didn't bear any fruit per se, I did get a couple of interesting tales related to the Bell Island boom and the swamp and the bog. And they're from relatives and family of my wife, and it's actually a quite a collection of weird little stories. According to some of the people that I spoke to who lived on Bell Island, the boom, like you said, was explained away as mega lightning. However, without getting too deep into the tale, I have heard from several people now that though that was the official story, that the day before the meteorologist or the scientists who were working to discover or to study this mega lightning phenomenon, which typically only strikes in the middle of the ocean, and they were wanted to kind of study this the day before that they showed up, or the week before, something like that, a little bit before those guys showed up on the island. Two men in black clothes and black vehicles and black fedora hats and black sunglasses, or a black vehicle, I should say, showed up, rolled off the ferry. Of course, everybody on the island took notice, because that's not a very common thing to come rolling off the ferry. And they proceeded to go to the farm that was hit the hardest by this mega lightning. There was a piece of property close to where the strike happened, and like you said, it blew out electronics all over the island. It caused massive amounts of damage, blew the tops off of barns. There was and there was a lot of livestock and whatnot killed. Now, as the story goes, these guys went around and they actually purchased every animal that had been killed by this mega lightning. Now, there's not too much information surrounding these guys other than they spent the day driving around paying for the carcasses of animals who were killed by this boom with cash. And then they loaded all these animals into their vehicle. Nobody's quite sure what they did with them. I don't know if they got a trailer or what the case was, but according to people on the island, they took the bodies of these animals and then left. Now, aside from that, I did come across a couple of tales from two different people who are actually relatives of mine. One who had spent some time in the bog and had reported the feeling of uneasiness. He was on a dirt bike and was out near the bog and stopped to have a cigarette when he noticed this stillness, this eeriness to the air. And he kind of looked around and suddenly smelt this vile stench, which is it's a very big part of the myth of the hag. this creature, this feral creature that people report seeing crawling. It's the last thing they remember seeing is this feral, evil-looking old woman crawling through the bushes, scrabbling towards them at a high rate of speed. And they're just overcome with the most foul stench, the smell of death, the smell of the grave. And it's so strong that it overpowers them. And as he told me, he smelt that smell, and every hair on his body stood straight up. And he spun his dirt bike around, threw his cigarette out of his mouth, and just hightailed it out of there. And he did recount a couple of other stories similar to that, just to point out the weirdness, how nobody in that area goes into the bog. No one goes into the woods. They don't leave the communities or the highways, which is kind of odd for Newfoundland people, because Newfoundland people live off the land.
A lot of people take pride in going into the woods.
It's a proud, exactly. I mean, I was a bit of a city boy growing up, living in a very small city or small town, large town, small city. But I did a lot of hunting and fishing.
And the thing about Bell Island is that it's also a tourist attraction. In fact, that was one of the the reasons I went out there, is they have this mine that goes miles underneath the earth, and you can actually pay to go on a tour of the mine. And now apparently lots of people have died, like from cave-ins and stuff like that, and people have said that they've seen like a whole crowd of these ghosts of miners who had died walking out of the cave. But like going from that, so this is what we were looking at. This is what Ryan found from his relatives and stuff like that. But he mentioned it to his dad.
Well, it was actually about 2 weeks after. So I got this little flood of information, and about 2 weeks later, out of the blue, I get a phone call from my father. Now, he had just so happened now he's from the west coast of the island, and he just so happened to be in St. John's on the east coast, going to a doctor's appointment. And while there, he ran into some friends of his wife's family. They spent some time together, had a few drinks, and somebody started telling a strange story, maybe an effed up story, you could call it. And my father took great interest in this, as he kind of perked up, and he noted some of the details, and he phoned me the next day. And
with all the details messed up, I
yeah, exactly. And started me on the path of trying to track down this individual. So I guess the strange circumstances being, what was the chances that my father 2 weeks later was going to bump into somebody who was from Bell Island, 8 hours away from where he lived. He bumps into a stranger to him who's from Bell Island, who tells him this strange tale. And
here we are researching.
And here we are, and just a couple of weeks before I had asked him for a strange tale from that area. And he calls me with one. And through a bit of screwing around over the next couple of days, I'm actually able to, because the story is being recounted by a friend of a friend kind of a thing. And of course, I know the details are murky, and I do my best to track down the original storyteller, the original experiencer, and I did. So that whole scenario just floored me. Just the things that had
just
to happen.
The happenstance.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. What was the chances that this kind of thing was going to happen? So I guess to get into the story. Because originally, as the tale was told to me, it was so upside down and backwards that it really didn't bear any resemblance to the actual tale. But then when I finally spoke to the young man who had this experience, I have to say, I found him while it's not unusual for people in these small towns. You run into people who have more than a passing belief in supernatural. It's not very often, even in this day and age, that people take it really seriously. There may be certain superstitions and local myths and stories that kind of hang on to even the modern day, but generally people don't take this stuff too seriously. And here we come to the curious case of a young man named David. Now, unfortunately, we weren't able to get David to do the actual interview with us today, but I did speak with him at length about his ordeal, and I'm going to do my best to recount the tale in its entirety. Basically, the whole scenario starts with David and 4 of his friends at a gas station. While they're refueling his truck, this strange man just walks up to them out of nowhere. And though David didn't notice it at the time, he was actually smoking a cigarette, and he walks right up to him as he's refueling his truck. And he looks at David and his friends, and he looks back to David, and he points at him and he says, "You're the man for the job." And of course, that kind of got them all looking at one another. They've never seen this guy, and they have no idea what he's talking about. And then somebody notices that the guy's smoking, and they tell him, you got to put the cigarette out. And he just kind of chuckles and finishes his cigarette, and he puts it out on the bumper of this guy's truck.
Which is already like a dick thing to do, but it's also kind of intimidating too. Like, I remember when you first told me the story, like this guy had like a presence about him. He was an older guy, right? I mean,
well, that was, at the time, he, they just looked at him, thought of him as a strange guy, and he did give off a bit of a weird vibe, as David put it to me. But like you said, yeah, that kind of sets a scene, doesn't it? A strange man walks up to a group of 4 men and just, says, "You're the guy for the job. You guys are the guys for the job."
Too, right? To dose your cigarette in someone else's vehicle like that.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I know if somebody did that to my new truck, I don't know what I do. I'm pretty sure it wouldn't be anything good. Anywho, as the story goes, these guys are pretty confused by the offer, and after a bit of talk, and of course, they're from a small community. There's not a whole lot of work, and this guy wants to hire them for a job, and all he tells them is he wants them to work on a wall, wants them to do some work on a wall for them. And through some more conversation and haggling, they agree to do the job. So a couple of weeks later, they're contacted, and this guy says, "Hey, rather than you guys having to drive back and forth on the highway and take the ferry across and into the city, why don't you stay at a house that I have rented? And the 4 of you guys can stay there while you're doing this job. And, it won't cost you anything. You can just stay there and do the work. And when it's done, you can go on back to your homes." So the guys agree to this. And the first time they walk into the house, they instantly, all of them instantly have some sort of reaction. The first guy, he gets sick to his stomach. The next guy gets some headaches. Just a whole range of physical and psychological phenomena,
and
anxiety,
intense, right?
and fear. That was what made it so remarkable, was that as they all crossed the threshold into this house, each of them were overcome with some kind of intense sensation, whether it was just an intense feeling of sickness or some sort of anxiety or apprehension position.
Yeah, so to be clear, it's not a subtle thing. Like, I think I feel like this is ominous. This is, you walk in and it's like hit with a ton of bricks of something negative.
Well, as it was explained to me, one of the guys, he's so nauseous, he's almost choking, like, trying to, like, dry heaving almost. So I mean, that's a pretty remarkable change in physical state from one step to the next. Especially when you take into account that that everybody, all five of them, as they stepped through the door here, were kind of overcome in this way.
Certainly.
So on the first night, they're just kind of hanging out in this place, and somebody snaps a couple of photographs with their cell phone, kind of a thing, and then they head out to go grab some whatever, go on down to the store or something. And I guess while they're out, somebody, whoever was taking the pictures on their phone, they were kind of flicking through and noticed what looked like these shadowy faces. That he described to me as a devil face, floating just above a stool, as if the invisible body was sitting on the stool and the face was the only thing that was visible, staring. I
believe
at them.
Too, because I just remember parts of the story as you told it to me. Part of the reason why they were taking the pictures was that they were so astounded by the change in their feeling as they crossed the threshold. Like, it was bizarre. And someone said to, take your phone out and start snapping some pictures or something, right?
Well, that was after they actually, I think, the initial sickness, they kind of just, noted it as something weird and continued on with their night. At that point, they were still... they weren't really thinking supernatural.
Yeah, none of these guys,
and I think
none of these guys were into that, right? Like, they were not believers of paranormal or anything. And I think, just to state it up front, I mean, it's part of the reason why they shrugged off a lot of stuff in the beginning and just kept trucking, right?
Yeah, and not only that, but they nor were any of them very religious people. They didn't have a very strong religious background, though it was a smaller community, and of course everybody in the community is quote unquote Christian, like most Christians or people of any major religion today. I mean, it equates to being such a small part of your life, really, that they were just casual. They were Christians out of name, we'll say. They weren't really hardcore into their beliefs. So it was after they noticed the initial, just took a random picture and noticed that face. That's when they came back. That's when they decided to take more pictures. And it was in the course of that they came up with even more images of strange things in this home. So a couple of days later, of course, there were several small things that were noticed about this place. Just things that kind of put you off, kind of a thing. Nothing specific per se, but there were certain qualities about the house that kind of put people on edge. And a couple of days or a week later, a couple of these guys, two of these guys were stood out front of the house. Everyone else was gone. And, the one guy says to the other guy, said, I wish I had a ride down to the store, grab some materials and stuff for work tomorrow.
This was in the driveway, right?
And this was, they were standing out in front of the house, and the driveway is right in front. And they're just kind of standing there talking. They don't have access to a vehicle. The vehicle that's the one person who owns the vehicle isn't there. And then suddenly they turn and look, and there's a black truck parked in the driveway. Now, this startled the two men because they were standing there the whole time, and it was a gravel driveway, and the chances of a vehicle driving up a 40-foot long gravel driveway that's wide out in the open. I mean, there was nothing obstructing their vision, nothing, and they were just standing there. And they turned around, and suddenly there was a truck there. And it startled them. And the one guy was really uneasy about the presence of this vehicle, and the other one, who had expressed his desire for a vehicle, was thinking, "Wow, look at that." And of course, he walks down to see who it is and what they want. And sitting behind the wheel of this vehicle is just a complete stranger, some strange older man sitting in this vehicle, and seems congenial enough, and just offers this guy a ride. Says, "Hey, I'm heading on down into town. Did you need a lift?" So, the two guys look at one another, and the one guy who wasn't too sure, and you may be noticing that I'm making a point to avoid using names here. It's on purpose. I didn't forget the names. I have all the names here. I'm choosing not to use pseudonyms or anything because I'm guaranteed I'll get that mixed up. And I'm doing my best.
And using the real names couldn't come back to bite us in the ass.
Yeah, I'm doing my best to protect the identities of those involved here. So to continue, the one guy who was, thinking it would have been nice to have a ride, he thinks it's a great idea to hop in the truck with this guy, and does so, and heads off down to the store, leaving the other guy behind, kind of bewildered and a little uneasy. So nothing, particularly untoward, we'll say, happened as far as we know. This guy got in the vehicle, went and got what he needed, and then showed up sometime later at the house. I guess that particular instance, kind of marked. I don't know if you'd say a turning point, but it was. It was only a few days after that when all of them were sitting around in the house playing cards. And the guy who recanted the tale to me, and the only person's name who I have used, his name is David. And the only reason I point that out, or I'm using the first name, is because it does have some bearing on the story a little later on. Otherwise, everyone else is going to remain anonymous for the purpose of this tale. So everyone's sitting around playing cards. When David looks out into the kitchen, which is visible from the dining room area where they're sitting playing cards, and he can see a dish towel, just a regular dish towel, and it's sitting on the countertop. And as he's watching this dish towel, the corner of it begins to rise up in the air and is pulled straight out, as if an invisible hand has grabbed the one corner of the dishcloth and has pulled it out straight, while holding the rest of it down to the surface of the coffee table or the countertop. So he's looking out into the kitchen, and there's a dish towel, pointing. It's stuck straight out like a hand is holding it, defying gravity. And he's just transfixed, staring at it, and it's pointing. He gets up and he walks across the room, and everyone's looking, and this dish towel is pointing towards a door. Now, this door in this house that doesn't belong to them, they're the only ones in the house. But ever since they moved in, while they were doing this job, this particular door had been locked, and they had made a point of not fooling with it, because they figured if the door was locked, it was for a reason, and they weren't about to go and invade somebody's privacy. It wasn't their house. So after, walking into the kitchen, the dishcloth kind of settles back down, as if, nothing had happened. And kind of with an uneasy chuckle, everyone goes back to what they're doing. So it's around about this time that one of the men, looks at everyone else there. And he looks at he kind of looks around the table, and then he looks to the one guy, and he says, I bet you, I can get you to pull out a 6 out of the deck. So he shuffles the deck and splits it, and he knocks on the table 3 times, and then he says, take a card. And the first guy pulls a card. And sure enough, it's a 6. And he says to the next guy, I bet you, as he's shuffling the deck, I can get you to pull out another 6. And he shuffles the deck and splits it, knocks on the table 3 times. And the next card that is drawn from the deck is a 6. And he turns to the third guy, and he says, I bet you I can get a 6 out of this deck. Get you to pull a 6 out of the deck, and knocks on the table.
Wasn't it one guy was yeah, anybody, it's a neat trick, but, and he says, you take the deck, and he cuts it or something like that, wasn't it?
Well, no. I think you might be a little confused there. By the end of it, they're all sitting around the table, and 3 6s have been pulled from the deck. And this is kind of starting to kind of bother some of the guys, because everyone knows what 666 means. And of course, there's some nervous chuckles, and people are like, nice trick. And that's basically what they were saying the whole time. I think is what you're referring to is that the first time they kind of chuckled and said nice trick, and he continued until it was quite obvious that there was more than just a trick going on. Now, as it was explained to me that this guy who was performing this card trick, that some kind of subtle change had come over him, that he didn't seem quite like himself. And it was around this time that one of the other guys begins kind of speaking in tongues. And, at first everyone's kind of chuckling because they think that he's just kind of fooling around. But he continues, he gets louder, he gets more aggressive with what he's saying, and he's standing up, and he's really having a really big rant, and people are starting to get nervous, and they're standing up from the table, and this guy is getting louder and louder, and he's ranting, and he's shouting out phrases. I do have some of the phrases here. Brutali and deck soil. Those were the only two phrases that the David was able to recount to me. Now, whether or not this has any bearing, I have no idea. But as it turns out, that was actually the same night that the new pope was chosen. So while this is happening, somebody suddenly, while this guy is chanting and making everyone very uncomfortable and speaking in tongues, and apparently what somebody identified as Latin, as sounding Latin anyway, one of the men suddenly starts talking about a giant black door, that he can suddenly see a giant black door on the wall behind them. To which one of the other individuals says that, yeah, he can see the black wall as well, or the black door as well. While the other two people, most notably David and the other person there, were unable to see the door. But the guy who could see the door gets suddenly jerked off of his feet at a weird angle, almost like he's being pulled towards the wall. And with that, his friends grab him and begin pulling. And the harder they pull, the harder this invisible force that's pulling on their friend appears to be. And though they can't see the wall, this guy's screaming and saying, you got to help me. There's something on the other side of the wall or the other side of the door. It's waiting for me. And the way he described it was as a 10-foot tall black doorway that just appeared in this blank wall. And as it was described to me, this guy was almost horizontal on the ground. He said it would have been impossible for a human being. He said his toes, he was on the tips of his toes trying to keep on his feet, while there was something literally pulling him backwards, and they were holding on to his arms, trying to pull him forwards. And the tips of his toes were on the floor behind him, and all of his weight was forward. So if you can kind of picture, I guess, an invisible rope around somebody's waist pulling them backwards, and them on the tips of their toes trying to lean as far forward as they can without falling over.
Now, I got to ask you something, just because I think I remember a part. I don't know if I got it mixed up, but while they were looking at this door, like two of them could see it, wasn't there, and I know like you got your notes, and so I just remembered when you told me, but anyway, wasn't there like they said they could hear something calling to them, and like almost as if through the door? Like they were friendly, or something like that.
And that's exactly. And before the experience was, after the experience was over, the guy who was being pulled did state that there was somebody on the other side of the door calling to him, telling him that they were his friends and that he had to come to them. But he knew that they were lying, and that's why he refused to go, even though he could feel this irresistible urge to go through that doorway. So while this is happening, their friend is still, getting more and more maniacal, chanting and whatnot. And with this, when this thing whatever force kind of lets their friend go, David turns and looks up into the corner of the room. And now this is straight from him as he described it to me. What he saw was a man-sized figure, all black, with 10 horns and two, I should say 4 rows of 3 eyes. So it's with 12 eyes. This thing is kind of, it's 2 rows of 3, and they're vertical rows of eyes. So it's a total of 6 eyes. I actually have a little diagram here because I got him to explain it to me exactly. So there's this thing crouched in the corner of the room, but it's on the ceiling. It's crouched in the corner of the ceiling and is staring down at them. And it has 10 horns, and it has 6 eyes, 2 rows of 3. And it's staring down at them. And with this, they just, they kind of lose, just kind of, we got to get out of here. Like this is insane. And that begins the process of them trying to get out of the house. So the 2 people who we're going to say that were the least affected, David and one other individual who was, I guess, the least affected, they begin to try to get their 2 friends out of the house. The one guy who was being pulled into the door, he ends up running up into the bedroom upstairs into the bedroom of the house, and it jumps into the bed. To wit, the other individual who wasn't as affected ran up after him. Meanwhile, David was trying to get his friend, who's still spouting off in tongues, tries to get him out of the house. So through all this chaos, David finally gets his buddy out of the house, and suddenly the two of them are in a fight for their lives. As the guy who's speaking in tongues pulls out a knife, and it...
No, you're skipping parts. I remember. I gotta stop you because I gotta hear it the way you told me. So they're outside, and I believe he asked him something. He said something to him like, "You're not yourself," and he said, "Yeah, I am." And he said, "Well, if you're you, then who do you love the most in the world?" Remember where I'm going with this now?
Yeah, you're 100% right. I actually have that on the next page of my notes, but it's in the wrong spot.
All right, so start from there.
That right before they get into this fight, as he's pulling them out of the house, he recognizes the fact that his friend isn't who he is, and he says that to him. He says, "You're not my friend." And of course, the guy who's speaking in tongues replies with, "Of course I am." And to which David replies, "Well, if you're him, who do you love?" Because he knows that this guy is in love with a girl who he nobody else knows, not even a girl knows, as far as David is concerned, that nobody else knows that this guy's in love with this girl, has been for years, and just head over heels in love with her. And with that, his friend kind of spins on him and says, "I don't fucking love anybody." And that's when he pulls the knife on him. So as David put it to me, a fight for his life kind of occurs. But almost as soon as it starts, and this, as he describes it to me, the guy, David, felt something come into him. And that's exactly how he put it. "I felt something come into me." He said it was like this power, this force, something just filled me up. And he said, almost without thinking, as my friend is coming at me with this knife, and I'm frantically trying to fend him off, he said, like a bolt of lightning, my foot suddenly kicks up and catches him in the wrist, and kicks him in the wrist, and the knife goes flying out of his hand. And he said, I'm not a fighter, and I'm far from a ninja to be kicking knives out of people's hands. But he said he had found some kind of strength and some kind of skill just out of nowhere, and he was able to kick this knife out of his friend's hand. And he feels this sudden upwelling of power, like in his chest, like something in his chest, and he puts his hands up in front of him, like it puts his thumbs right up in front of his chest, and he pushes his hands straight outwards. And as he does that, both of his hands come in contact with his friend's chest. And there's, as he described it to me, there's this discharge of energy. He just said, he didn't say there was a flash of light or anything like that. He just felt this immediate discharge of power, whatever it was that had filled him up, discharged when his hands come in contact with his friend's chest. And as he described it to me, his friend, the guy who was speaking in tongues that attacked him with the knife, literally was blown across the street. And as he described it to me, that this guy easily went 20, 30 feet from where they were standing. This force had blown him across the street. and into, because they're in kind of a rural area, and into a marshy area to where he landed. So he screams at his friend to stay put and not to come into the house, because now he knows that the two of them are out, and he can hear his other friends inside the house, and he rushes in to try and get them out. So as he runs into the house and he goes upstairs, they find their other friend, the one that was being pulled into the hole, into the doorway. He's in the bed, and he's just sitting on top of the bed, and the one guy is trying to pull this guy out of the bed, and he's holding on to his arms, and he's pulling with all of his might. And from what David told me, standing there looking at it, he said it was completely surreal, because it to him, the one guy was pulling, he was pulling with enough force to, pull a doorknob off of a door. Meanwhile, this guy is lying or sitting in the middle of the bed with his arms and legs outstretched, and Buddy is hanging on to him and trying to pull with all of his might, and this guy is just not budging. So David jumps in and starts trying to pull him out too, and this guy is just, it's like some invisible force has him bolted to this bed, and the two full-grown men are pulling on him with all their might. And he says, as far as he can tell, he's like, when somebody's fighting you. He's like, but as far as I could tell, this guy was not fighting us. That he was, he was almost out of it. And they were pulling on him, and he was calling out, and he was terrified. And finally, they get him out of the bed, and they're doing their best to haul him down the stairs and get him out. And it's like there's something that's pulling him back into the room, trying to keep him there. And as they're coming down the stairs, David looks out the window, and he can see his friend is now picked himself up from the bog, and he starts running full charge across the street and up the driveway. And he's thinking, oh no, he's coming back in the house. He's like, how are we ever going to get out of here if I can't get everybody out at once? And just as this guy reaches the stairs, and I guess this was, as he described to me, it was another almost dreamlike, surreal moment. He took the first couple of steps up into the threshold, and his left leg was in midair, just about to take a step onto the next step, when his whole body goes rigid and freezes. And David's standing there, staring out the window, looking at this guy, and it looks like every muscle in his body is straining with the effort of trying to make himself move forward. But there's some sort of invisible force holding him in place, so much so that he can't even force his left foot down onto the step that was going to be this next step up. So, the night kind of ends with all of them kind of spilling out of the house into the night, onto the lawn. All four of these guys tangled up together, kind of in this exhausted, confused pile. They pick themselves up and they just get away. I'm not sure where they spend the night, but it wasn't in that house.
Yeah, they made like a deal. I don't think either one of them were ever going back.
Yeah, that's that. Well, they pretty much decided at that point that they would never go back into this home.
And just to point out too, originally, because I asked. So what was this wall that they were working on? That was, because that's what this guy hired him for to begin with. It would seem the point of the whole thing. To which you asked David, and David said, it wasn't about the wall. Forget the wall. It was all about getting us into that house.
Yep.
Right? Like that.
And I guess that's where the tale takes a weird turn.
Yeah, that's where it takes a weird turn.
Yeah, exactly. We get into some strange territory because over the next year, David starts to come to terms with certain things. Now, he eventually tells this story to his mother, and his mother, who's deeply religious, begins sending him Bible passages, and he starts reading this stuff. So the first thing that she sends him, and I'll be perfectly honest with you, I haven't gone and gone through the Bible myself to corroborate this. However,
from what he tells, project for everyone listening.
Yeah, exactly. What he tells me is that the first passage that he's given by his mother tells a story of the devil inviting four people to work on a wall, and this is all in an effort to kind of fool them. And he uses, while they're working on this wall, the devil works on these men to try to infiltrate, to try to take them away from God, kind of a thing. And though I don't know the whole story, this is supposed to be. I think this is part of some of the Bible prophecies.
And it could, again, like me, I didn't look. I actually did look, but it's kind of hard to find,
specific
put in phrases to find that, that little section. And the Bible is one book, but there's a lot of there's a ton of books within religious systems that
even within Christianity, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books that have never made it into the King James version of the Bible.
Yeah, I actually downloaded an app that had dozens of versions of the Bible, plus other books like Deuteronomy and all these different ones that I don't know if they're necessarily in the actual Bible, but there there's lots of different variations and stuff like that. So it actually is hard to track down. So anyone out there listening, if the passage that Ryan's talking about, we'd appreciate it if you could corroborate that this is actually a true verse or something in one of these books, right?
Yeah. Well, for me personally, whenever we start talking about the Bible and Jesus and God and stuff, things start to break down for me a little bit. I don't have the greatest amount of faith in the Bible per se, as a book written by men.
No, we just want to know that what David was saying as
exactly, and I mean, let's face it, that we don't know what triggers supernatural events. We don't know what makes people susceptible to them. We have a lot of guesses, and there are a lot of people who are of the mind that belief plays a very strong part in the whole scenario. So, like I said, this is where the story kind of gets strange. Is David begins over time to build this connection between his experience and several Bible prophecies which bespeak the return of the archangels. I guess as he explained it to me, the archangels are supposed to return to earth before the end times, incarnated as human beings, that they would be born upon earth and to live their lives as men without ever realizing who or what they are in reality. And that such a thing would only become apparent to them once the end got even closer, and that they were truly needed on earth. So as the next couple of months go by, David begins to do more and more research on this stuff and draws more and more parallels. And, he did provide for me a whole list of not so much list as he did recite to me a bunch of Bible stories and prophecies, which seem to have a lot in common with his experiences. Everything from the 10-horned demon to the black door. And to that point, they even spoke with a priest about the matter, and a local priest in the area told them, "Oh yes," when they spoke of the doorway, he said, "Oh yes, of course. The curtain between worlds is thin right now," is what he said. The doorway, or the passageway between worlds is thin. So I don't think he got any more clarification from the priest than that. But
he said something about the Devil's Rock, though, didn't he?
Well, now those came later. There's a local myth of that the devil was banished there, and that there was a local bishop who had placed a rock over this place where they had banished the devil, and he had stated that the devil would stay banished from the world until when that rock basically cracked in two. And if you go to that rock, they call Devil's Rock, you will now find, through whatever process over the years, that there is now a giant crack right up through the center of the rock, which apparently was not the case just a few years ago. But that rock has now cracked. Some say fulfilling the bishop's prophecy. But I guess the strangest, or one of the strangest things to have happen was that, months later, while David's still trying to sort this stuff out, he comes across this his mother sends him a passage that states that I believe it's the Archangel Michael will be reborn, as a man. David, the son of David. So, of course, that hit our David pretty hard, as his name is David, and I guess in some circles you could call him Junior, as his father's name is also David. So, right out of the Bible prophecy, as he recounted them to me. Again, I cannot verify the veracity of this prophecy. That he is indeed David, son of David, and he had this thing happen to him, just like the archangel made mortal out of the Bible story. And then a couple of months after that, he gets a strange package in the mail. Now, for me, this is one of the weirdest parts of this whole story, because I don't like I said, I don't put much faith in Bible stories and whatnot, but I am open to everything.
And we did see the picture of this. Anyway, go on.
Yep. David got a strange package in the mail one day, no return address. The package was from the United States. So he signs for it, opens it, and inside is a medallion. And this medallion has the names, I believe, of the 4 archangels inscribed upon it. Now, it doesn't look like an old medallion. It looks like something newer, or something that was made in this decade anyway. And it just out of nowhere, this medallion with all these angel symbols on it. Now, David did provide a picture of the medallion. Now, I can't say 100% for sure that picture was taken of a medallion that he had in his home, or if it wasn't just a picture off the internet. But the man gave me no reason to disbelieve him. And in fact, the night before I spoke to him, as he tells me, he felt some sort of force come into him, and he grabbed up a pen and a piece of paper and began scribbling a whole host of well, to me, was indecipherable script. Now, according to David, he was actually able to read some of this script, and to me, I kind of looked it over and compared it to other things I could find on the internet. And the closest thing I could find was some of the symbols seemed to match the language I believe is called Nietzschean, which was supposedly recorded by John Dee, who channeled angels back in the Middle Ages for the Queen. He was a scientist and an astrologer and an alchemist and a mystic, and supposedly spoke with angels and recorded their entire alphabet. And to me, that's what this looked like. Now, David claims that he can actually read some of this writing, though he doesn't, like, to look at it, he can't say, okay, well, that is, that's an A and that's an E and that's an R. But he does look at certain lines and he's able to translate them. Now the translations were just small phrases, and all he gave me out of it was the numbers 4243, Messiah. The next thing he was able to make out was losing days. The next thing he was able to make out was he says. The next line he was able to make out was devil's prophet. 8485, and the names Gog and Magog.
Now, one of the things that we'll do, because like Ryan and I think we're both on the same page that once we got to this segment of the story, we don't really. It's hard to really,
where it's hard for non believers like ourselves.
I think it's hard for anybody to believe that, yeah, okay, this is a guardian angel reborn or something like, it's one of those things I mentioned in our last podcast that I can't believe in. But what we will do, we'll post a picture of the medallion and the script on the website. I'm not going to put it in the podcast just because if it becomes an issue later on and I got to take the podcast down, it's really going to piss me off. So I'm going to put it on the website so that, just go to the pick section and it'll be there. And if you guys can look at it and see more in it than we can, we'd like to hear it. So just go to effedupstories.com, effedupstories.com, at the pick section. Look at the pictures. I'll probably put links to it in the podcast on the website, like in the body description. I'll probably put links to the pictures there so that you can quickly go and look at it. But yeah, so we're actually looking for your expertise in that area. Perhaps someone who listens to this might know more about it. And yeah, for the record, he sent Ryan a lot of pictures. I've actually seen a lot. I've seen the same ones. He's forwarded them to me. The medallion and the script, they were strange to me. I mean, that's the best I can put it. I don't know what it is. I don't know what I'm looking at, but, it's peculiar. The rest of them, David would say, told Ryan is all third hand to me, but, like, I could see a face here. I could see this here, that there. I couldn't really see anything strange when I looked at them. It kind of made me think of, how people can find faces and things.
Yeah, and that's the only photograph that he sent that I felt that I could see what he was talking about, because according to him, these faces will only show themselves in the black hours of night. That even a photograph of them won't the image will not reveal itself unless it's in complete darkness at nighttime. Now, I mean, that was strange enough, but I did follow his directions. I uploaded the pictures off of my phone onto my 46-inch monitor, blew them up and changed the colors, and sure enough, in one of the photographs he sent, while I was looking at this, 11 o'clock at night with all the lights off, I could see what looked like the ghostly visage of a lion's face. Now, this is what, and that's what he told me it was in the picture. And when I blew it up, there was this, now being a scientifically minded individual as I am, I kind of sat back and I looked at it and I said, yeah, it does kind of look like a lion's face. But to me, the image looked like it was made out of very low quality pixelation that was caused by, a basically a crappy phone camera being used in low lighting. You get crazy artifacts and a lot of pixelation, low resolution image when you have low light with a bad camera. And to me, that's what I felt that these images were. Now, I know that David doesn't feel that way, and
I guess the bottom line is that, and this is where I came away from, what I took away from it. A lot of times when something big happens, and you can't process it.
Exactly.
And what you end up doing is
viewing it through the lens of your experience.
Yeah, and trying to find bigger meanings because you can't explain it. Like someone who gets abducted by aliens, after the fact, might say, "Oh yeah," someone who gets repeatedly abducted might, fashion the story together that, the aliens are good to me. I'm helping them with something. I'm spreading the word of this. But I don't necessarily think it's because all these people are just crazy, or at least I don't think it starts out that way. I think, when something really traumatic happens and you don't know how to process it, you kind of just invent this way and you go with it. And again, this is just my thought on it. And in the case of David, like you said, he wasn't religious. He wasn't, he didn't believe in the paranormal. And then you had this crazy thing happen that happened to 4 of these guys. And then his mom is really religious, and he's probably looking for some kind of comfort from somewhere.
Exactly.
And his mom is sending him
some way to explain this.
Yeah, and his mom is sending him these Bible passages and stuff like that, and he's, and he fashions the story that, maybe that's why this happened. I'm an angel. I'm some kind of. So that's my take on it. But the fact that he took all these pictures, the fact that he went through the trouble for of a lot of this stuff, because he had a lot of pictures. To me, that means that speaks more credibility towards that he had a strange experience, right?
And he's trying, at this point now,
he's grasping
a year later, exactly, he's desperately trying to find a way to explain this and to have it fit into his world paradigm somehow. I mean, he's having to change his whole worldview to include the fact that supernatural entities exist and that they are able to interfere with the material world. I mean, that's a terrifying prospect for somebody who has never considered that to be a possibility before. So yeah, I think I agree with you in your assessment that it could very well be, his best attempt at trying to explain this. But again, it always confuses and kind of it makes me very interested this whole scenario with the medallion, because that's the only part to me that seems way, and I really grilled him about that, I exactly how it arrived at his house, because what it was is the post office phone. It's a small community. They don't deliver the packages right to your door. They phone you, you go and pick it up, and that's exactly what he did. And I said to him afterwards, is there a chance that somebody had ordered this for you and just didn't tell you that, and just hoping that, maybe they believe in it. What, is it possible your mother did it? One of your friends did it as a joke. Your mother did it because she believes that you are the incarnation of an archangel, and she wants you to embrace that. And, on all accounts, he vehemently denied there being anyone else that he knew who was involved in it. He said, in fact, for a long time, it was only very close friends and family who he had ever told the story to. And even then, he didn't really get into the archangel stuff. So for this medallion to suddenly show up, he said he really doesn't think that his mother would have done something like that. But really, at the time, that would have been the only person. And he said, my mom's really religious, and it's not like she has a lot of extra money lying around just to be ordering stuff off of the internet to have delivered to my house anonymously. He said it's just a very strange set of circumstances surrounding his acquisition of the medallion.
So the way that if we're gonna kind of sum up some interesting points here, you got these four guys who meet this really strange guy who just like approaches them in a ballsy way, really almost like a dominating way, who offers them a job in a way that almost is like, I'm not asking you, I'm telling you. That's the way it came across to me. And, gives them this place to stay, which immediately reacts badly with them. And they have, where that truck, again, it's always like this black vehicle. I mean, I even feel like the first time you told me this, the guy who approached him was like this older guy who had like, like those police sunglasses, unless I'm remembering it wrong, but I thought I remembered, what I'm talking about, those big sunglasses, that intimidating, that hides, half your face kind of thing, black.
Yeah, like the sunglasses
like those
I wear.
ones. So, this guy approaches him, basically told him, that they're...
You're the guys for the job.
His cigarette on their truck. It's like, you're doing it, you're staying in this place. They do it, and, they got that truck that appears in the driveway. They're looking down, they look up, it's there. Everything to keep them in that house. And then the bizarre things that happen in there, they see a door appear in the wall, this guy is speaking in tongues. To me, it really, I don't know, at first when you told me the story, I half thought, like, I asked you, that's why I asked where the wall was. I was like, well, is the wall that they were working on, where they were seeing the door. But it wasn't even that. It had nothing to do with the wall. It was to get them in there.
And even Davis said to me, he said, I don't even think there's anything off about the house. He said it wasn't a super old house. He said, I don't think there was anything about the house, but he said, I think that's where it was hiding. That's where it had made its lair, had made its home.
Did he ever say what happened to that guy after? The guy.
No, I don't think they had any contact with the guy after the job was over. Or basically, after they left that house, I think that was the end of that.
Because the whole way that he appeared, the first time you could say, okay, it's just some guy that drives up. The way the second guy appeared, and just the black vehicles, the black everything, it almost to me has a supernatural quality to it, right? It's like they're not people.
Oh, most certainly. And I guess there's one little thing that happened. I guess it was like 8 or 9 months after that everything had happened. These four guys were together again. and they were, driving down the road, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but somebody they stopped at a Tim Hortons, and there was something. Somebody got this weird feeling. That's what it was. It was this weird sensation that something was wrong. That there was something in the truck. That there was, and one of the four guys got really apprehensive. And so the first, basically the first stop that they came to was this gas station with a Tim Hortons in it, and they pulled over. Other coffee houses are available. They pulled over, and David, thinking that there was something in the truck, put his cell phone on audio record, and left it in the truck, and they all went inside. So they went inside, and they get a coffee, and they sit down, and they're just kind of sitting there in the window. The truck's sitting right in front of them in the driveway, and they're just, sitting there looking out on the highway, kind of trying to get rid of this feeling of apprehension. And once they're finished their coffee, they go back in the truck, and David grabs his phone and, plays back the audio. So while they're sitting there listening to the audio, it becomes apparent that there's this very obvious sound, like something moving across the back seat of the chair. Like you can hear something being dragged across the fabric of the truck seat and moving around inside the truck. Now, bear in mind that they were sitting there in full view of the vehicle the whole time, and they can clearly hear something moving around inside the truck. And they're sitting there kind of transfixed, listening to this audio, knowing that, whatever it is, if there's something in there, it's still there, because they were sitting there the whole time looking at the truck. And, he said that the tension was getting worse and worse. And he said then they started to hear these sounds, unmistakable sounds of somebody turning pages of a book. So with that, they suddenly start looking around, looking for, somebody says, that's a book. Who, like pages. Who has a book? Where's the book? And ever since the incident, I guess David had begun taking a Bible with him wherever he was going, and he had one in the truck on the back seat. And then somebody spotted the book sitting on the front dash of the truck, kind of amidst the clutter of other stuff that was there. And it was open. And the page was folded so that it had 10 horn-like protrusions. Like they were the corners were folded so that there was like 10 spikes made out of the book, out of the page, pointing straight up.
That's pretty foobar.
And that was the last, incident that the four of them, I guess, experienced together. I guess initially there was at the gas station, there was 5 of them at the gas station. But I guess only 4 of them took the job, and as such, it seemed like these 4 were the ones who were followed by this phenomenon.
Yeah. So, I guess at the end of this, I mean that's essentially where our story ends. I mean, we do have. I mean, I know Ryan has plenty of other details of, and it, the guy's outlook on. And all things angelic. But I mean, I guess the reason why we're not really going to cover it all is because we don't really know where we stand with that. Actually, we kind of do. I don't think either one of us really buy into that part of it. I what I said earlier, and that he probably, this is his.
He really does believe. I think at this point he really does believe that he is the incarnation, that him and at least one other of those guys are the physical mortal manifestations of of some of the archangels. That specifically that he is the archangel Michael.
And our outlook is that this is how he's dealing with what happened to him that he can't explain. So, and I can already see, I can predict that, people are either going to side with our theory or just throw the whole thing out, because it is, for the most part, it's pretty out there, right? But what we're going to ask you guys to do, because I do genuinely believe, like, the original story of what happened to him, there's just so much there. I mean, it changed his life. It changed how he lives. It changed, you know what I mean? Like,
the only part that we're not necessarily believing in is his analysis of the events. I mean, it's like, just because L.A. Marzulli says that UFOs are demons doesn't mean that UFOs aren't real. It just means that, they may not necessarily be demons.
Yeah. So what we're going to do, everything that you've heard, we're going to put some of this stuff, the pictures, we're going to put them on effedupstories.com. I'm not going to have them in the podcast just because if, for some reason he doesn't want it out there and I got to take it down, I don't want to have to take down this podcast.
And before anybody out there asks, no, we can't do an interview with David. I really tried to get him to agree to do this. He was very reticent in talking to me in the first place. Of course, he was really weirded out that some stranger from halfway across the country had got his number and asked him about this strange story to begin with. But even after him and I conversing a lot over the course of a couple of weeks, he was really, really unsure about doing an interview, and he wanted to wait. He wanted to wait until he understood more about what had happened. He wanted to decipher the angelic writing. And I really just think he wasn't comfortable speaking about this whole thing. So before anybody asks, no, we can't interview him directly. I've tried so hard.
My impression was that the reason why he was speaking to you to begin with is to try and get you to help him figure out what had happened to him.
That's exactly
it. Had nothing to do with being on a show or...
He really was under the impression that I was some sort of paranormal investigator, and that I was able to use my connections to suss out the meaning behind this writing. He seemed to place a lot of meaning on that, or a lot of significance on whatever it was that he had written.
So you guys will get to see that, because
we'll put it up there as long as he doesn't contact me and flip out.
Okay, so if you guys see that picture and you know what it means, we want to hear what it is.
And also, if you recognize the medallion and where it came from, or you have any idea of what it means, please drop us a line.
Yes. So with that having been said, that actually is partially to blame for the delay, was Ryan trying to get David to interview.
I tried really hard, everybody.
That said, this is a story that when Ryan first told me, it really wowed me, because, it just got crazier and crazier and crazier. And for the record, I do think that... I know it's not as fresh in your head, but I know there's certain parts that you missed that, made the story that much better. So just so everybody else knows, I heard the best version. You're getting the the somewhat...
You're getting a week's old version.
Yeah, the muddy...
I do apologize. I do have my notes here in front of me, but of course, as I was doing the notes with David, talking to somebody on the phone, at times I would find myself just absolutely captivated by what he was telling me and doing my best to catch up with notes. I do apologize. I probably have, or I definitely have left out details. Although you do have the meat of the story.
Certainly.
There is a few little things that I've left out here and there, but that is as I know it, that is the complete meat of the story.
So if you have a paranormal story podcast, what would you need us? Now, if you have a paranormal story, picture, video, or again, like a topic that equivalates, is that a word, equivalates? If it's equivalent to our Skinwalker Ranch, like, that really out there, crazy stuff on the fringes of the paranormal, we want to hear it. That's what we hunt for, is what our favorite stuff is. The crazier, the better. If you have that, send it to us. We'll cover it. And with that said, thank you, everybody. We hope you enjoyed that story. And that's it for me, Will Pender, signing out.
Good night, everybody.